I'm David Rammel, editor of Virtualization and Cloud Review, here to welcome you to today's event, Leaders in Tech Series, Mid-Year Cybersecurity Trends Review, Top Threats to Know, brought to you by KnowBe4, Okta, Barracuda, Manage Engine, and Zerto. Before we start today's two-session event, we do have some announcements. First, we want to let you know this event is being recorded and will be available for future viewing. You'll receive an email when the replay is available, generally within the next few days. Also, today's first session will be followed by a 5 to 10 minute Q&A, so please be sure to put your questions into the Q&A area of your console as they come up so we can get them answered for you by our expert. And following today's summit, we will be giving away a selection of prizes in a random drawing. But you must be present to win, so be sure to stay on for the entire event. Finally, we do have resources from our sponsors, KnowBe4, Okta, Barracuda, Manage Engine, and Zerto, available on the console right now. So please download and check those out. It's because of our sponsors that we can bring you this summit, so we thank them for supporting the community and ask you to check out those resources so we can bring you more events in the future. Now on to the first session, featuring Ian Thornton-Trump, the Chief Information Security Officer at Cyject and the CTO of Octopi Managed Services. His 25-year career includes service in the intelligence branch of the Canadian Armed Forces, the Canadian Forces Military Police Reserves, and the RCMP. He's been a cybersecurity consultant for both multinational and regional organizations, and today, as a virtual CISO, he helps both large and small companies build security operations and cyber threat intelligence programs. Ian, it's great to have you here. Please take it away.
Oh, thank you so much, David, and it's absolutely fabulous. Please help our sponsors out by giving them a follow on the social media platform of your choice. We couldn't do this if it wasn't for our sponsors, and I wouldn't be able to do this. So it's really exciting. This is me in the center. I'm not Anna Delaney and I'm not Matthew Schwartz, but I wanted to talk about the vibe a little bit, because one of the places that you go to understand sort of where the industry is at and what is going on are the large information security shows like RSA. But over here, we've got a number of them in London that are usually at the Excel or the Olympia. And this was at InfoSec, which is a 3-day conference. And I have to say, I noticed a big change in the conference scene. There were a heck of a lot more people that were there than last year. So that's pretty exciting. Let's get started then on a look at some of the trends, the top threats to know. Now, this is not going to be name the names and shame the players. This is going to be about some of the trends, big T on the trends. I come at this from an assumption about the fact that it's all geopolitics driven at your firewall. Nation state actors or those criminal groups that are being sheltered by nation states are exacting a toll on the West and on Europe and are building footholds in Asia and South America and, of course, Africa. And I see things through a slightly different lens than other people do. But what I will say is I'm going to take you down that road today and give you some of the latest updates from some of the research that Cyject does that I think we made available in some of the collateral for this as well, and some real life examples. So hold on. I've got about 25 minutes to tell you about what's going on, and it's been a little busy. I think the first big thing that really came out in the last months is really about understanding that the pure nation state threat actor does no longer exist. Absolutely sure the FSB and other organizations do have forces, they have cyber capability. However, what we're seeing is outsourcing. We're seeing a lot of contractor ecosystems, Iran and China, and of course, Russia with its engagement in the African Republic, especially with anonymous Sudan. We're absolutely seeing a lot of contracting going out from these major protagonist organizations. Of course, in the case of Iran and Russia, petrodollars go a long way in in Africa, as well as South America and Asia, of course, with China being one of the largest consumers. So we're really seeing a big change in the aspects of there aren't enough domestic capacity to build cyber forces. In the case of Russia and Iran, they are certainly more concerned about kinetic warfare than they are cyber. So we're seeing a lot of contracting going on, and that seems to be sort of the new thing. Now, to be fair, in the Western world, the intelligence agencies of the Western world are made up of contractors from all sorts of different companies involved in consulting in the military industrial complex. It's just interesting to me to see these nations, or rather to discover that these protagonist nations, the CRINCs, if you will, for China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, when we refer to them collectively, have also adopted a very similar model. Now, the other thing that is really big is we broke news, Cyjax broke news, and I included, this is a blog post we put up by Adam Price. You know, we're in the answers business. The who and how anyone can do, I do the hard part, the why. But here's the big news that we're seeing as a result of some phenomenal, and I do mean phenomenal, law enforcement victories against cyber crime and the cybercrime ecosystem. We're seeing a reorganization of ransomware groups. This is for a couple of reasons. One, of course, these massive takedowns, right? We had Operation Kronos. We had a number of operations take place recently that really made the huge difference with the announcement. Operation Endgame, which was an attack on the ecosystem of the actual botnets that were used to drop malware onto endpoints. Everything is very siloed in cybercrime, okay? And I think that's really important to understand. That's something that is even moving quicker. We had our ransomware as a service guys affiliates. We now have initial access brokers. We have bespoke malware creators. We have the cybercrime industry has become very specialized, okay? The big one was breach forums, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Snowflake data breach, why it's so important, and how, and I'm going to tease you guys a little bit today on how we could weaponize that for major election tampering in the near future. The other big one was a takedown called USDT. USDT, the Chinese actually took these guys down. They are responsible, or so the Chinese suggest, for over $2 billion in cyber criminal money laundering, and the Chinese identified them as being the primary source of money laundering for Asian organized cybercrime groups, along with regular criminal groups. Now, I put up this wonderful picture from Instagram because I just absolutely, this is one of my favorite fail moments in cybersecurity. And we'll talk about some of the latest stuff too. But that picture is a guy named Mark Sokolovansky. Mark Sokolovansky not only faked his death, but he's a Ukrainian national cyber criminal who was responsible for Raccoon Stealer. Okay, Raccoon Stealer was another one of these ransomware as a service type of organizations. They hit a lot of businesses, right? Well, this is a picture that law enforcement got on Instagram. That's his girlfriend when they made it out of the Ukraine. And of course, it led to his arrest. So, folks, cyber criminals are not indestructible. And in fact, I would say law enforcement is hitting back hard, including in the latest operations, trolling the cyber criminals, which ultimately led to the recent arrest of the lead guy for Scattered Spider, right? Which is pretty amazing that a British guy was arrested, 22 years old, by the way, was arrested in Spain. And they're suggesting that he was the mastermind behind the attacks, of course, on the MGM resorts, which I believe in the K8 filing for MGM resorts, they believe the impact of that particular cyber attack was to the tune of 50 or so more $million. Now, there's another thing that I wanted to put up here for you folks to understand how difficult it is to go after these guys in money laundering land. This is the indictment for Darren Lee, or Lee, I guess, depending on how you would pronounce that. And I think it's fantastic to see the level of complexity that's involved and why these type of investigations are so comprehensive and involve coordination across all of the different law enforcement agencies. I think you can see on the Operation Chronos slide that there were 34 law investigation organizations involved in this, and just a massive global effort. But when you read this indictment and the detail and structure of these money laundering organizations, you have to shake your head on, like, how are they figuring this out? How are they managing to get at these bad guys? So just absolutely a phenomenal effort has been made by law enforcement, changing the dynamic in the criminal underground, where you're seeing a lot of criminal organizations rebrand, right? Restructure. They're recruiting people from other organizations, all to obfuscate the open source intelligence that we have on these bad guys as they form new bad guy groups. So that's a really big thing. And top of the list right now, and at the top of everybody's lexicon in cybersecurity, is our first trend, the initial access broker. Now, initial access brokers are now like a key component of both the revenue stream of cybercrime, and then, of course, selling access. We wrote a big report on this talking about how infostealer infections that date back to the 2020s, this has now become the credentials du jour. And here you have shiny hunters, Ticketmaster data breach, advertising the card details, the user details of 560 million users, 1.3 terabytes of data. I believe he was looking for $500,000 US for this. Now, I'm going to make an assumption right here, because what's interesting is shortly after this announcement was made, breach forums went offline. Breach forums had gone offline, but then they came back online because they're now cyber resilient, just like our businesses should be. And then they got pulled down again by law enforcement, only to what we think is going to reappear. Now, the Ticketmaster data breach, I've got a few things to say about it later on in this presentation, but I have to tell you, this could be one of the most important data breaches in the history of data breaches. And I'll tell you why in a little bit. But let's go to trend number 2, lawyer, okay? The United States SEC and class action lawsuits are rampant through cybersecurity these days. I have been looking at a lot of the class actions that have been filed recently with Progress Software for the MoveIt hack. There's now a consolidated class action, which is taking almost nearly all the attorney state generals, so of all the United States, certifying a class action with a lead law firm to take this one forward. This, of course, Progress Software has come out and said, we have a robust security program, and everything we did, we can't be blamed for this. Okay, well, we'll see how that goes as a defense, because it'll all come out. And it goes through phases now. It goes through the shareholder class action lawsuit, right? That then goes through possibly some court motion to dismiss, in the case of SolarWinds, denied, settlement, and the whole thing went away, okay? They thought. SEC investigation. Eventually, this could land, and it has landed Tim Brown in heaps of trouble. I see a new playbook here. So lawyers, and this, folks, is costing us a tremendous amount, not just as consumers of these products, but I certainly will say for the organizations that get impacted. Really is a big trend that I'm seeing. Another big trend. This was really interesting to me that IC3 in their latest report, right? So let's be fair. This is 2024. It takes them a while to put together the report. This is based on 2023 data. Beck used to be at the top, but investment scams have skyrocketed through. But actually, when you crunch the numbers, anything crypto related is almost double, okay, where we are for the investment scams itself. We're talking about $8.14 billion in losses with regards to anything to do with cryptocurrency. And actually, within that report, if you read the fine print, right, investment fraud with reference to cryptocurrency rose from 2.57 billion to 3.96 billion in 2023. We are almost at the point where we need to go to our businesses and ask them, because we know what the non-trendy thing is, which is it's phishing attacks. It's always phishing attacks. It was always phishing attacks and will always be phishing attacks, it seems, in terms of the initial vector of compromise for organizations. Okay, so given that, are we at the point now where we just need to write a universal rule that basically if we have nothing to do with cryptocurrency, we don't deliver any emails that have cryptocurrency or crypto or Bitcoin mentioned in them? Because it is ridiculous the amount of scams related to cryptocurrency, the attacking of the wallets, and of course, fake investment schemes, get rich quick, being offered to you by impossibly beautiful women on Instagram, which is probably a terrible idea. Okay, now trend 4 is the weaponizing the data breach part. And this is going to be a bit more of a deep dive, because I think everyone here needs to understand, of whatever political your persuasion are. Okay, I should have had maybe a warning sign here. I'm going to talk a little bit about politics, but I'm talking about it, and I don't care which side you're for or anything like that. I am looking at it from a threat vector to democracy, specifically the United States and the next election, but also equally applied to really any Western European election as well. Now, you'll notice this appears to be Tom Cruise in a Olympics Has Fallen, what appears to be big budget movie. Well, folks, it actually was. That's the scary thing. Russian influence actors, in this great Microsoft report, Russian influence efforts to cover the 2024 Paris Olympic Games. Highly recommend that everyone read this blog, okay? But they literally used AI technologies to build a fake movie, blockbuster movie, talking about a terrorist attack on the Olympics starring Tom Cruise. All right? Unbelievable. And right now, what we're seeing is a massive increase in the amount of hacktivist attacks looking at causing disruption. Now, one of the problems is the way disruption is being framed, which is completely undermining the security of the Paris Olympics. Obviously, it's not helping that the Paris elections have become a dumpster fire over there. And so we are having an international event where Russia has been excluded from participation, right? And we have a city that is historically protested pretty much about anything by setting stuff on fire. So this is a big thing. It's going to get ugly right now. I pray that everyone is safe, but I fear that, man alive, we're seeing some new weaponization of disinformation attacks like you can't believe. So how are we going to do this? Well, there is some good news about good news. So the first part of this is how the voting public generally consumes their information. And it does come from what I would call far more trusted sources than social media. The problem is younger voters are going towards social media at a rapid pace. That leaves them open to the Ticketmaster data breach and how we can weaponize it. So first of all, when we look at the breach, we can use data tools to answer these key questions. How many concerts have you been to? Where do you live? How many adult tickets did you buy, right? We can get an insight from that data breach on what you've spent your money on. And this, my friends, can be facilitated by big data tools, right? And we have a ton of big data tools. And I want to bring your attention to the big data tools that nation state actors will use. Palantir, IBM, Analyst Notebook, Multigo. These are the ones that can take big data and turn it into something usable. And here's a great example of it. We have a massive social media network influence hairball, output by location, sorted into superconnector nodes. Finally, we find influential folks that sit in the middle of the nodes, okay? And these are what I would say heavily influencing social media controlling points. Why does this become important? Because we can think about how the politics line up from where you're sitting and what kind of concerts you've gone to. So as an example here, if you've gone to, Toby Keith, Ricky Skaggs concerts, they've come out in support of the Republican nominee, Trump, okay? And so it's likely that your politics may align. I'm not saying it's 100%. You can sure go and enjoy these artists and take them for what they are. But the majority of folks may be predisposed to a Republican policy or position, okay? And then we can apply some data points here, such as this, is that the winning presidential candidate in Nevada and Ohio has gone on to win the overall election 89% of the time. So we want to focus our red team efforts, our evildoer efforts, onto particular states that are deterministic for the outcome of the election. And then what we can do is we can go deeper dive, because we got one powerful piece of information out of that data breach that we've never had before. And not only can we determine a bit of the political persuasion that you might have, but we have the zip codes where you bought your tickets from and where you were. And that, my friends, is the answer, because it may not be a frontal assault. It might be by trying to cut off funding for a particular area that is donating per household, 40 US dollars per 90210 area code to the Biden campaign. So you can see how we can take this data, innocuous data, and then we can knock it down. We can put it through these algorithms to sort out and identify the key states, the key players, the richest zip codes that are funding organizations, political organizations, and we can target that and send through our disinformation and conspiracy theories, our misinformation and false flag stories, and of course, voter suppression. And what's really interesting about voter suppression is it's actually illegal to do. Now, what's really interesting to me is this is an 18 USC code 241, which is essentially interfering with your constitutional First Amendment right to exercise your vote, robbing you of your vote, okay? So this is an interesting thing. This guy basically tried to say, well, the shit posting he did was actually, it was memes, it was satire, it was, basically hyperbolic. The court denied his motion. So maybe he needed a better lawyer. I'm not sure. But the First Amendment in the United States has limitations, and this guy crossed them. Now, this indictment you can find online, but essentially it was telling folks that they could vote online via text message instead of going to the polls. Okay, and obviously some people believed it. It got, basically it got the Eastern District of New York picked it up, and this guy got convicted. He didn't do a lot of time for this at all, but it does mean that there is a legal mechanism to protect the integrity of the elections, and it's in the United States Criminal Code, okay? Which leads us to how we may be able to deal with this as a trend by using our extrajudicial territorial agreements with other countries, right? That have essentially done harm to the United States, i.e., have been indicted for United States Criminal Code. Title 18 is what they call it. The reason that's important is Title 18 is the one that we can always use, wire fraud typically, right? And conspiracy to commit wire fraud as the way to round up folks that aren't even American citizens, so long as there's an American victim. So I say, let's do that. Because what we got to start doing is taking down and sending a stern message. All of the nations do, all of the Western democracies do, that we will not allow our elections and democracy to be tampered with. So there is a legal mechanism. We just have to figure out how we're actually going to execute that. And then again, Trend 5 is the big one, right? This is a game changer in a lot of ways. The SEC adopted rules on cyber risk management, strategy, governance, and incident disclosure by public companies. They basically brought the hammer down and said, enough of this. The United States supply chain for the government and for many government agencies has been compromised by folks lying about the state of their cybersecurity. So now they've asked you to attest in a document under penalty of perjury that you have these things. And now you lie at your own peril, because there won't be like, oh, you were fraudulently representing your company to these shareholders. Oh no, my friends. This is now going to 18 U.S.C. Code 1001, statements or entries generally, that falsifies, conceals, or covers up by trick or scheme a device or a material fact. This is where I think we're going, in that the United States has had enough of being victimized by organizations that have been playing way too loosey-goosey with their compliance posture and with their attestations. So that's going to stop now. And interestingly enough, yesterday, the SEC said it was going to clamp down on folks that are making outrageous declarations around AI and their capabilities of AI. And I bet you they could use this criminal statute for the most grievous of those type of things. So, because they keep me on a tight schedule here, it's now time for the Q&A.
All right, and we do have some questions, and we got about 5 minutes to get through them. So let's just start, and we'll come first serve. If you want to follow along, Ian, that would be from the bottom up. The first question is patching every 30 days still advisable? Should we patch sooner?
That is a great operational question. So the data is showing us that proof of concepts released. So say if we go back to CVEs, right? And we look at like the 8s and the 9s, the 8.5s, the 9s, and God forbid the 10s. Trivial to build a proof of concept. Sometimes the proof of concept is publicly disclosed. You know, Twitter's great for that. The weaponization of that can go, sometimes I've seen it as fast as 36 hours. But as a great example today, there was a CVE announced on SolarWinds WSFTP server, and it's already under active attack. So 30 days now is, I think, below what the average weaponization of a proof of concept is at. But think about this. Say you decided to make it 15 days, right? To try and get ahead of the curve. You're talking about a lot more extra resources to do it. If you're struggling to do 30, 15 is going to take more resources and is going to increase the amount. So right now, in an audit report from 2 years ago, mind you, they were calling for patching every 15 days. Honestly, unless you're willing to change the IT budgets globally for a lot of companies, I think 30 is still a struggle, and I know many firms that are still doing 90.
Okay. Next question. Does EDR or XDR pick up the info stealers you mentioned in the IAP part of your presentation? If not, what can?
Okay, so qualified maybe on that one. Here's the biggest problem. A lot of the info stealers are working inside browsers, okay? Browsers are sometimes very difficult to get inside with your EDR, your XDR solutions, right? Because it's the browser, and the browser's operating within its own little ecosystem, and it's got, like, if you're Google Chrome, it's got its own little bits of security and stuff like that. So it's difficult now because the activity going on and that the browser generates, and then, you know, the browser going out and reading a cookie or something like that. How do you not know that within the browser, the reading of that particular cookie isn't a legit activity? You see how difficult it is. Now, I think where we're seeing the IAB part really start coming home to roost is in understanding the exfiltration that you're seeing from your overall network. So that's almost SIEM level and threat hunting capabilities. And of course, monitoring the IAB environment, which is no longer on the dark web, it's all on Telegram channels.
Okay, next question comes from Paul in the audience, and he addresses geopolitical threats. Should we worry about geopolitical threats regionally, depending on when it's an election year? If so, how should we adjust our cybersecurity strategies?
Yeah, so, you know, if you're, and I'd love to sit down and have a couple beers and talk about this, but generally here's how it happens. When we start blaming China for espionage, China's going to retaliate with, you guessed it, David, espionage. When we start blaming Russia for cyber attacks, what's Russia going to do? They're going to subcontract it probably to a cyber mercenary group in Africa or Asia, and they're going to conduct cyber attacks. It is absolutely tit for tat going on. And even regardless of the election year, it seems to me that CISA, or back here at GCHQ slash NCSC here in the United Kingdom, there's a dartboard, and it has the names of a bunch of countries on them, right? And China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea have the biggest slices of the pie on that dartboard, and they just huck the darts at the dartboard and pick which country is next on our list of people we don't like. Because seriously, when they come out with a warning that says China is doing espionage, that's like not news. They've been doing espionage since 2000, and they've been really good at it. And so telling me that they're doing more espionage is, you know, sort of like saying, guess what? We can get more chicken from the chicken shack, right? Like, so I think realistically, what we need to understand is the quicker we can get the intel, the faster we can act, and those IOCs become the way of shutting things down. Sometimes the Department of Justice is going to act on our behalf. They're going to go ahead and shut down a whole bunch of things the bad guys are using. Volt Typhoon, the Iranian threat actor botnet that was created, was a great example of that.
All right, let's try to squeeze in one more question. It comes from Jason in the audience. He asks, what is the best way to protect your devices from zero-day attacks?
Yeah, so really it's about segmentation and isolation. It's really tough to do if they have to be open to the entire internet, right? But what you need to look at is proxies and reverse proxy architectures in a way that doesn't expose those devices, right? So again, it's about your architecture. It's not really about, can I deploy security control? There are some great products out there that can do like network level blocking and threat detection at the edge. But actually, if it's an authenticated connection because of a 0-day on your VPN endpoint device, you're kind of hosed, man. I don't have a good news story for you. The best thing you can do at that point is you've deployed your EDR and XDR on your endpoints, and you're looking for indications of compromise. That's the toughest thing about this, about these endpoint devices, where we've been really kind of like, huh? How's this all working? It's never been in scope for a pen test. Maybe it should have been, right? So, yeah, I mean, it is a difficult thing, but I think it starts with architecture, segmentation, and monitoring for abnormal behavior. That's about the best we have right now, mate.
All right. Well, it looks like that's all the questions we have time for. So thanks again, Ian, for an excellent presentation and answering all those questions.
Absolutely my pleasure. I love these. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys again.